after birth. All of those things will determine the outcome for that individual. But I can say quite cheerfully that on the whole, second babies, who generally are worse, if you don't do anything, if you just do what you did before, eating and drinking the way you had, and all the rest of the other influences, you'll have a baby who's worse, and they'll get subsequently worse in families. Because when I dealt with these things in the 70s, I was dealing with established families who might be asking about the last baby. You could see this pattern of more severe allergy happening as the family went along. And so with the fifth baby, which was one of the families I dealt with, she was expecting that it would be a nightmare. And we talked about what she could do beforehand. That baby was qualitatively the easiest baby of all five of them. You can actually improve things for the baby. You can't guarantee that the baby will be completely allergy-free, but you can certainly guarantee that they will be better off for taking the trouble to do the sorts of things that I describe in the book, limiting their exposure to allergens, trying to make sure that the mother is as rested as possible, a whole range of things that all relate to the way that body of the mother and the baby will be interacting. So there's not guaranteed to be completely problem-free, but I'd say there's a fair chance that they will be better than the previous baby, and there's a very, very high chance that they will be miles better than they would have been if you don't do anything and you just repeat the experience in the family that you've had before. So it's worth taking the trouble. It's worth being allergy-free around the time of conception. It's worth making sure you're healthy before you conceive the child. And then during the pregnancy, if you know what your allergens are, removing those before 18 weeks into the pregnancy when the immune system starts to develop. Obviously, if you're not that seriously allergic, maybe having small quantities of these things is useful. But again, this is something only the individual can decide. I can't give you a blanket rule, because what you do for a healthy person with no symptoms of allergy would be to try and ensure that they had as wide an exposure as possible to things. A person who's allergic and who's already had an allergic baby, we don't know that that's the best advice for them. And generally I would say it's probably better for them to limit their intake of these things or to avoid them altogether if they know that they have had problems with those in the past. And if the first child is already having problems with those things, it tends to indicate that gestation was a factor. And so it's worth modifying your diet during pregnancy, particularly, of course, if you're starting having vomiting symptoms and so on in pregnancy. I've known cases of hyperemesis, as they call it, which just stopped like that when in fact the mother stopped having the food that she was allergic to, which was generally milk in those cases. And it often, 99 times out of 100, probably milk will be involved. But it doesn't mean that you should start there without thinking about what other foods might be more significant for you, because clearly there can be others. If you were, for instance, fed a soy formula as a baby, you'd start with a soy elimination rather than starting with a cow's milk elimination, because there'll certainly be consequences to having been soy fed as a child. So, yes, I think the answer is as variable as each unique individual, but I do think there are things you can do, and I've outlined them in the book, and plan, above all, plan to have only you in contact, and your partner, of course, in contact with the baby around the time of birth, to make sure that the baby is kept skin to skin for as much as possible, because that reduces stress in all sorts of ways, and it helps the baby regulate itself far better than the baby being separated. And make sure that the child is truly exclusively breast milk fed in that time. So I get mums who've got this problem to express colostrum and freeze it and take it in. You can get little syringes from the chemist that you can express even 0.5 ml of colostrum in and squeeze it out from your nipple and suck it up with the syringe. And have other milk as well. If you've got a friend who is feeding her baby and she's willing to give you a few 10 ml syringes of her milk, freeze those as well. Take all of that stuff in with you. And so if there's any chance, people are saying, oh no, low blood sugar, we have to give the baby formula. You say you don't give the baby formula, you give it some of the frozen breast milk that I've got in the fridge there. And you can do that in just about every hospital. Nobody, you should check out beforehand if you think it's unlikely. But in fact, a baby who is fully, truly, exclusively breastfed around birth is much more likely to be symptom-free than a baby who gets 1 or 2 bottles of formula at that point. Even a tiny quantity of formula is enough to distort the development of the gut microbiome, because bacteria going in, it's a unique period where the colonization, you've got a gut that's got very few bacteria in it, and the ones that get in first, the pioneer bacteria, actually shape the way the gut develops, and they shape it so as to enhance their ability to persist lifelong. So they actually instruct the gut about how to develop, and they create little nooks and crannies for themselves where they're capable of hanging on subsequently. That means you want the bacteria that go in there to be the bacteria from breast milk, not from anything else, and from your skin through breastfeeding, and not from anything else. Skin of people who are related to you, that you've shared your microbiome with, not a problem. So your partner, your mum, whoever, these are people that it's probably safe to let carry your baby skin to skin. That baby wearing and exclusive breast milk feeding are the 2 keys. If you can also arrange, and sometimes you can't, to be antibiotic free at that stage, that's a big help. But if it's only breast milk going in, the antibiotics will kill things off, but breast milk will replace them again. And that's one of those things. People now worry about antibiotics. The studies that worry about antibiotics almost never control for the mode of feeding. And that means that anything that they say about the importance of antibiotics is dubious, because they didn't control for the big issue of formula versus breast milk.
Yep.
So yes, you can do lots, and you should be hopeful, because being hopeful and optimistic also means you have a better hormonal profile in your body, which will help you as well as help your baby.
Great. Well, you answered my last 2 questions in one answer, which was great. So thank you for sharing all this information with us today. You have so much information you've given us, and I'm sure this will help a lot of parents out there.
I hope they can manage to last for the whole of the podcast.
Yeah, it's pretty long. And I will get the names of those books you've mentioned. So anyone listening who, if you want to buy those books that have those resources, then just have a look at the description of this podcast, and I'll write them on there, so it's easy to get to. And we're going to create, Maureen and I are going to record a couple more podcasts just on breastfeeding, extended breastfeeding and formula feeding. So if you're interested in that, then keep tuned for those in the future as well. So yeah, thank you for listening, and thank you so much, Maureen, for coming and speaking with us today.
Fine, thank you.